Okay, morning everyone, Marina. Leanne Johnson, I'm the Secretary for Howick branch, and between myself, Sarah Yates and Tom, our President, we thought it would be a really good idea to help everybody out with maybe some practical things that could help us in this time of interesting schooling, shall we say. So we're happy for you to have your videos off if you don't want to be seen, and thank you all for being muted. If you would like, you can also have us all on just speaker view rather than grid, and if that makes you feel more comfortable. Also, if you do have any questions as our speakers are talking, there's the chat questions that you can go into chat and put up a question. If you'd like to put the name of the person in front, that would be helpful too. So we have the wonderful Peter O'Connor and Carol Mutch with us today, and Peter's going to start us off with a whakatauki and get us started. Thank you, Peter.
Kia ora, Leanne, nā rangatira e nā hoki, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ruia taitia kia tu koti tai kaka anahi. Strip the bark to find the inner wood which carries within it that which will sustain us. And so today's session is what matters now. A number of years ago, I was working for the Ministry of Education, and I was asked by one of my mentors and guides, Dorothy Heathcote, an arts educator, these two questions. So in New Zealand schools, do children do things that matter? And in doing those things, do they know that they matter too? So today asks the question, what matters? If we strip away the outer bark to the essence of what we do as teachers, do we do the things that truly matter? And in doing that, do children know that they truly matter too? So I'm hoping that what we do today answers those two questions. What matters now? And how do we do things so that children understand that they matter, that their well-being is at the heart of everything we do as teachers? Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate that. So I'm going to also share a couple of things with you that prompted us to put this together, and that is there will be some questions from children that perhaps some of our members or just everyday teachers out there won't respond well to, don't know how to respond to. And for example, if we go, would you like to share your news? Then all of a sudden you get a kid saying, oh, mum lost a job. We went to the food bank yesterday. So how are we going to help these children with their well-being? And I know every single family out there, including us, has had a completely different journey throughout this 4 weeks and longer. It will be longer. So I would just like to share with you my story to make things a little bit human for everybody and realise that you aren't alone. We are in this together. So we went into lockdown, and to be quite honest, I was quite happy. I was like, yay! And I Zoomed with my kids for those 3 days, and everyone was good and everyone was great. And then we went into holiday mode. And then I realised that I actually wasn't that good at working at home. I didn't do any work, didn't check my emails, and did lots of things like bake, run, bike, went for walks. And I thought I was doing okay, but by about week 2 or week 1 when we started back, I was like, oh, I want to talk to somebody different. I'm sick of seeing the one person in my bubble because I'm just in a bubble with one person. And I was like, this is really hard. And so then I started thinking, I need to phone people. That'll be my start. I'll talk to people on the phone. So I phoned lots of people. But then I realized, oh, I'm quite lucky. I have a couple of people that I know that live locally. So I went for a walk and I phoned them. And I said, I'm outside your front gate. Come talk to me. And that's how I managed getting through that. And when I came back and got back into schoolwork and realised, Leanne, it's week 1, term 1, you've got to do something, I managed it better. But I'm still struggling a little bit. So for everyone else out there, your bubble could be amazing and you're making the most of this time with your family. And I thank you for that, because you'll be okay. But for those of us who are struggling just that little bit, it's okay again, and we will be okay. And just hang in there, okay? So I'm hoping the rest of this for you will be practical. I hope that I've helped some of you along the way, and I'm going to hand you over to Peter and Carol, who will continue this with us, and they'll introduce themselves a bit more and talk a little bit more about themselves. So Peter, do you want to start? You're on mute, I think.
You've now unmuted me, I think. How am I now?
Yep, you're all good.
Cool. I can't see anything. My screen has gone blank. So the joys of technology. Kia ora anō. So I'm Peter O'Connor. I'm a professor of education at the Faculty of Education and Social Work, University of Auckland. And my interest in this work is and has been for a long period of time, how do we support teachers when they go back, either after or during an ongoing crisis? And this is a crisis of a magnitude that none of us imagined even 5 or 6 weeks ago. So understanding that teachers are often placed in the battle lines, in the forefront of a society's response to crisis and disaster, and how do you practically help and do that? I've been involved in a number of different disaster areas immediately after the earthquakes in Christchurch, and ongoing work in Christchurch schools, in Mexico City after earthquakes, and most recently supporting teachers and principals in the bushfires in Australia. So I taught for I know 15, 20 years. I'm still in and out of classrooms every week. So I'm hoping that the kinds of things we'll talk about today, Leanne, will also be really practical advice and support for teachers.
Thank you for that. Carol, would you like to start and introduce?
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui. Thank you all for taking the time today. Thank you to NZEI, Sarah, Leanne and others who have gone to the trouble of putting this together. And thank you, Peter, for opening this for us. I think your words were very wise. So I'm not in Auckland. You are talking to me in my home in Canterbury, which tells you a little bit about how I came to be interested in what happens when schools, teachers, principals and students face traumas of a variety of kinds. I do work with Peter at the University of Auckland, but my post-earthquake story had me lose my job and have to find a new job, which required me to commute up to Auckland. So I lived squarely between two different camps, the kind of ivory tower academic world where we try and make sense of what's going on, and the everyday world of working through earthquakes and mine disasters and mosque massacres. And like Peter, I've worked overseas as well. So what I'm trying to bring to you then is not just my wisdom, but the wisdom of all the people that I've talked to and worked with, whose tears I've wiped, whose stories I've laughed at. And I want to share some of that humanity with you, because I know firsthand as a human being facing these things, and COVID-19 has tipped my life upside down as well. but also that, as Peter said, what my research showed across half a dozen different countries is that society takes the role of teachers and principals for granted, and that you are just expected to front up no matter what is going on in your lives behind the scene, put that smile on your face and deal with the kids in front of you. And I'm always conscious that there are many brave people, and we don't want to downplay our health workers at the moment, our essential workers, or in earthquakes, it was first responders and police and firefighters, but nobody gives teachers and principals medals. No teachers and principals are invited to shake royalty's hands. So I'm here as your biggest advocate, and hopefully also with some wise words and human stories to share. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Peter, would you like to start with some ideas for us? Or some questions? I know some of our members put some questions through.
Well, I guess the first thing is to say that often when one of the mantras which I think is wrong is that when schools go back, it's about returning to normal. Well, there's nothing normal about this, even in the slightest way of thinking about it. So this idea that you go back, or or even online, that you pretend nothing has changed, is not backed up by the research, is not best evidence practice, and actually it's likely to be harmful because it denies the humanity and the reality of what people are going through. So, sorry, I should have turned that off before I started, and now it won't. So the importance, I think, of saying, don't feel that the important thing is to go back to a normal classroom or to replicate what a normal classroom is online. These are extraordinary times, and you need to do different things. And one of the different things you need to do is to deal with what comes into your classroom. All the muck, all the stuff. You can't ignore that. And it's as simple as that. And you need techniques, structures, and strategies to deal with it. And my sense is, as someone who works in a faculty of education and social work, none of us were trained or taught how to deal with this. We're making it up as we go. And the best we can do is to use the research and the evidence of people like Carol and myself and others who've been involved in this work. So that's my starter for 10 is, please don't go back into classrooms next week and replicate what you were doing before, because the world's different and you're going to have to be doing something slightly different. We'll talk about the kinds of resources that we've been developing at the university to support people going back. But I think that's the first thing to kind of say.
Great. Carol, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, my first thing to say is that you are not superhuman. You are ordinary people with lives that are swirling around you. Don't try and be that superhuman. You can't keep it up. You will just end up totally exhausted. I mean, Leanne's already given us an example of how she is feeling. And when the lockdown first started, or we first even started hearing about coronavirus, even for me, it was like this kind of big black cloud following me around. I kind of understood earthquakes and tsunamis and so on. They were these events that kind of happened, and then you came in and you did stuff. But this was like this big black fog of miasma that followed us all around and left us with this huge unease. And I think that we're taking some of that anxiety with us into many of you who will have to go back to school, in the sense of going onto the school property, even though it won't be anything like a normal school day, as Peter has said. You've got to look after yourself. Don't pretend you can do everything. Don't pretend you can solve everybody's problems. Try and find a way of saying, yeah, I can't give 110%. I can give 80%. And hey, I'm a great teacher and 80% is pretty good anyway. I've got to leave a little bit in reserve for me and people in my bubble and people not in my bubble, but whom I'm really worried about. So please look after yourselves. You are precious. And you won't get through the chaos of the next few weeks, months, however long this goes on, if you don't put yourself first. You have my permission to be a little bit selfish. So that's my starter.
My starter is very much the children are in my front of mind 100%. And I have offered to go back to school, and my senior leadership team know this, or my principal does, because I don't have children at home. I don't have an older family with me in Auckland. So my bubble is small and I don't mind it being there. And I know that there will be some of my colleagues that have their own children and they are going to be worried, and you will be worried sitting there right now listening to us. You could be very worried and going, I don't want to go back to school. And that's okay. It requires, I think, a discussion. And I'm hoping that our management for each individual school will take this on board and listen and know that there will be different stories for different people. Now, one thing I'm going to do in my class, or with any children that I have in my class, because it might not technically be my class, it might be a broad range of students from different classes, is just let them talk. Like Peter said, I'm not going to go straight back in and go, right, there's the role and now we do maths. It's like, no, that's not going to cut it. And these kids need the chance to be able to talk, and they need the chance to be heard. And even if it's just catching up and that socializing with other students, because that's, I think, what they have missed a lot as well, their human contact with their children their age. So that's my starter for 10. We'll go back to Peter and let's see what other questions we have there.
Yeah. One of the things for me around this talk bit is recognizing that there are, for some kids, this has been a really traumatic experience. For others, it's been kind of like a lot of fun to be with mum and dad, and how you kind of deal with that range of emotional response and so forth is really important, but you can actually build that into some curriculum areas. So I think it's really important for them to talk about things, but what I've always been interested in when kids come back after schools is to find safe and protected ways of doing that. So one of the resources that we're going to have available for schools by the end of this week is ways for 5 and 6 year olds, for example, to talk to a bear who's been in lockdown and explaining to the bear why that was an important thing to do. And there's lots of ways in which you can, or opportunities to talk about the way in which the bear felt. So it's not about them talking necessarily about their feelings straight out in front of others, because that's really confronting and not necessarily the safest way to go. But what we know is that the arts and fiction is really important. So the other thing that we've got, I think is great for primary is picture books. Really high quality picture books, which, for example, have at the base of them stories about being scared, stories about being brave, stories about following rules, stories about why you need to at sometimes listen to your mum and dad because they're telling you things that will be useful for you, and using those stories as ways to catapult into talking about the difficult things which kids have been experiencing. We've developed some work for this resource. We're having to find new ways of saying hello to each other. You can turn that into a game. You can play with that. You can be playful with that. It's really important on that first day back that kids get an opportunity to laugh, to play, to enjoy being out of the bubble. And managing that for you as teachers with occupational safety and health issues around that one of the ways in which you can do that is structure games where they can play and do all that work, and the game is against is against them with the social distancing rules. So I think you're absolutely right. Ways to talk about things, but ways to talk about things safely, and the arts and story and all those things that we know as teachers and primary teachers are really good ways for opening kids to talk. They don't have to talk about themselves, but they can talk about someone in a story. They open up far more easily. So I think that's the kind of things that I'd be looking for going back next week.
Thank you, Peter. Carol?
I want to pick up on 2 points. The first one is for those children who are physically going back to school. One of the things that children told me all over in my research, mainly around Asia and the Pacific, was that what they needed was familiarity. They needed to see that some things in this crazy, chaotic, abnormal world were still normal. And one of the things they wanted to do was literally walk around the playground. They just wanted to go, oh, you know, the running track's still there, the basketball hoop's still there, the playground's still there, my classroom is still there. And so that will be an important thing to build in as well, that they can't just walk to school, get out of the car, get off the bus, etc., and run chaotically around the playground, because we now have a different set of rules. So how can you turn recognizing all the things that we like into, as Peter said, sort of a game, a bit of a treasure hunt, a walk or something, and keep those social distancing things there, so that they go, oh, phew, there are still books in the library, there are still balls in the sports shed, whatever it may be, so that they get that sense of familiar. Their entire world is not completely tipped upside down. So that's one point I wanted to pick up. The other one, I think it builds on that idea of what do you have to cover in a day? And we've already heard both Peter and Leanne say, yeah, no, you're not going to sort of say, right, sit down everyone, arms folded please, and now we're going to do whatever. And I know that the question that's come through from you, and it's also coming through from parents, is how much do we have to cover? What should we have to catch up? Should we go straight back into the curriculum? And as part of my role at the University of Auckland is I teach about this thing called curriculum. And I think we have this idea that curriculum kind of gets handed down on tablets of stone with a set of rules, thou shalt teach literacy, numeracy, whatever. But in actual fact, the curriculum is really just not quite an idea that we made up, but a set of things that we put together that some people think is what we should be covering. But if you think about how much you know, we don't know an awful lot. If I think about my knowledge of history, oh yeah, I know a bit about the Egyptians and the Middle Ages and early Māori and so on. What we know is a patchwork. And you can't expect that everyone knows everything. So if you take the idea of a patchwork with you, it gives you a way of thinking about how you're going to cope when you go back, what you're going to worry about that you put up online, and how you respond to parents. Because what makes teachers teachers, what makes teachers professionals, is that they can't teach everything. We don't expect to know everything. But you can take these beautiful, colourful pieces of fabric and pull them together in a really imaginative way. That's what teachers do. Teachers will say to students, what were some of the things that you did while you're at home? And I know in our neighbourhood, one of the mothers has been teaching her kids to weld. Now, yeah, it sounds like great fun, but your job as a teacher is to go, what's welding really about? Okay, it's about, you can think about it. It's science, it's technology, it's following instructions, it's creativity, it's trying new things, it's working in a team, it's doing whatever. There's a whole range of things in there. So you could take widely different activities and bring them together in a much more holistic way. So when you worry about what should I put up online, actually, does it matter? Enriching experiences. Do you even worry about catching up? Well, you're going to take enriching experiences and mould them into a way that deals with what you should be covering in the curriculum. Because as we all know, the curriculum achievement objectives are quite broad. And if you know the curriculum well, then you can go, oh, of course, this fits under science here or social studies there. I can use the literacy progressions to make a bit more sense of the reading I said, whatever. So please don't panic. Think about your creativity, think about your patchwork quilt, and use that as a way of doing something useful online, the conversations you're going to have with your students you're still Zooming at home or however you're contacting them, and when they come back to school. Just lots of exciting, enriching experiences that you can then mould in ways that help them cover what they need. And the last point is that in some countries, they don't teach children to read until they're 7. So Scandinavian countries, for example, do lots of, pre-literacy skills before they actually teach children to read. Now, their children catch up really quickly. So there's going to be a whole lot of maturation that's going on as time goes by, so that when you do get back to whatever this new normal classroom might look like sometime in the future, children will have matured a little. Their social skills, hopefully, with all the things they've been doing at home, with the reading that you've set them, or they're sharing reading with their parents, so their literacy skills will have gained as well, and so on. So remember what I said, don't beat yourselves up. You are amazing human beings, but just take that idea of how you're going to take all these wonderful, different, diverse experiences and make them fit into something beautiful, and say, what an amazing experience we've all had in terms of our learning in lockdown.
There's a lot to pick up, Carol, and I was thinking of my experience of working in the eastern suburbs of Christchurch for the last 10 years. So one of the things that will happen, I think, when kids go back next week, is your anxious children will be more anxious, because there will be levels of anxiety in their home that will just lift everything up. So 10 years now, or 9 years after the earthquake, when I go into schools still in the eastern suburbs, the levels of anxiety is extraordinary. And the ways in which teachers have to shift their pedagogy and the ways in which they have to work is something that you're going to, and again, you haven't been trained for this. You've got no support for this. This is not about medicalizing trauma. This is not about sending trauma teams in to work with kids, but just recognizing the world is incredibly anxious, and every reason to be anxious about. We don't know what future, or even, we don't know what the future is. What it might even be, and having a sense of that when you're 9, 10 and 11 years old is really throws them. So when we ask, so the notion that schools have always had at the heart of them, well, not always, but for a long time, is that it's preparing kids for the future. Well, no one prepared us for this. This was not the future we were preparing for. The other possibility is that schools are about making sense of the world now. And I've always thought that should be the purpose of education. But when we ask the question, what matters, and we're trying to work out what our curriculum should be, it's about trying to make sense of those of our lives now. It's education for now, for the moment. And that's a really difficult shift. When I go into schools in the eastern suburbs in Christchurch, and look at the kinds of levels of dysfunction many of them are functioning with, I don't know if that's, or, who knows what does it mean when children come back after being locked down with their parents for 7 weeks, catching bits of the news, seeing people in body bags in the US, Italy, Spain, all those kinds of things. The levels of anxiety will be really difficult, and you're the adult in the room. You're the one who's not just teaching them, but caring for them, loving them, being with them, all those kinds of things. Your teaching will be different. You may not even recognize how it's different at first, because all you'll be doing is coping. But that's what's facing teachers over the next period of time. And kind of understanding and moving into that flow, thinking, oh, I'm doing that differently. Carol's right, there needs to be routine. Kids feel safe in the routines, but you will be different teachers because the kids that you're teaching with are different, and the purposes will be different. Going back to school, preparing kids for the future is not what we're about at this time. It's actually going back and helping them make sense of the confusion of the world. And I don't know about anybody else online. I'm not too sure what the meaning of all this is either.
Thanks, Peter. I wanted to pick up on that idea of routines, because that was exactly one of the questions that somebody asked. And if you think about it, we manage by routines, don't we? However you choose the routines in your class, whether children line up, put their hands up, put their books away in a certain place, or we always do things at a certain time. These just help for the smooth functioning of things. But when you come back after something like this, I've used the word familiarity quite deliberately rather than routines, because it won't be that at 9 o'clock we sit down, on the mat, arms folded, do whatever. The ideas of routines in non-routine contexts do change. Now, there will be some routines that actually we can't do anything about because they're health and safety. So you will have to do the hygiene, hand washing, the social distancing for children outside a particular bubble, all of those sorts of things. Those are routines that we will spend some time going over and making sure that everyone's got to grips with. But there'll be other routines. You'll have fewer children. You may, as Peter has suggested, not have the same children every day. And so you have to relax those routines in a little way. But at the same time, you need to explain to children why things are happening in the way that they are. So as part of allaying that anxiety, how do you find that balance between the familiarity, the things that they will feel good about or they are used to doing, but at the same time not stressing them out or yourself anymore because they might not be responding to routines that used to work in the old way? And so one of the ways of finding some balance is to take something that you might normally do, but allow it to have a few more options. So rather than this is the way that we always do this thing, this is the way we used to do this thing, but now we're just going to just shape it a little bit differently. So these are the choices that you have, because one of the things you want to give back to children who are feeling anxious and not sure about this new world is a little sense of control, sort of a tiny area of their life where they can make a choice, or they can ask a question or be part of a decision and so on, because we haven't had much choice. We have been locked down in our houses, and choices has been limited to going for a walk each day, or whatever activities their families might have provided or teachers might have provided. And while it's been fun, how much control do you think students might have had? And how are you going to lessen some of the anxiety in terms of offering them those options and those new ways of thinking about things with a bit more softness and creativity and play and engagement and so on? Because certainly for the first while, that's much more important than covering the curriculum, as I called it.
Lots of stuff there for me too, Carol. I think the routine of reading to your kids is really important. Most teachers read every day. At some, I did as a secondary teacher. I always read to my classes, read them books. it's the selection of books, isn't it? Now, when you go back, so what are you going to read them? And so, in this resource which we're putting out for schools next week, so books which ask lots of questions which sit not about COVID but about life, things which kids want to know about, which is why. One of the picture books that we're really interested in is a picture book about kids who are scared of the dark, and that the dark comes into their room at night. Well, it's a metaphor, isn't it? And it's a metaphor that's really useful that you can use to talk not about COVID, but you can talk about fears. You can talk about the fears that the children in the book have. And it's finding those kinds of ways of talking about, of getting kids to think about and express how they're feeling about things. Still inside the routine, still the big book that you're using, still the book that you're reading with the kids, but you're thinking about, which we do as teachers, why this book? What's this about? Why might this be really useful? The other thing that Carol brought up, which I think is really important, is that we all feel kind of helpless in this. We're relying on science, on the politicians, on government to kind of resolve this, and we don't have much agency over our lives. And agency is a big thing in education. We've been talking about it for a very long time with kids. How do kids get a sense of control over themselves, over their learning, key competency, managing themselves, their relationships with others? And one of the ways which I think in terms of curriculum, which is really useful, is to give them problem-solving kinds of capacities within stories which allow them to do things. So one of the projects which I was involved in Christchurch immediately after the earthquakes was a project called Teaspoon of Light. And it's a really simple piece of curriculum. It's got literacy, it's got numeracy, it's got social studies, it's got the arts. And it's a really simple story. A little girl wakes up in the morning and her cloth of dreams is torn. And what you ask the children to do is to help the little girl fix her cloth. And what they do is they provide advice, support, a little bit of magic, all sorts of different ways. And what it does is it repositions them from people who are just victims of something, but people who've got answers to things, who can work with those kinds of ways of working. So one of the, I've done Teaspoon of Light now literally all over the world. And what's extraordinary about that is that little ones want to help others. So find opportunities for kids to not be the people who are being helped, but are the people who are helping, and do that inside fiction. It's really important about seeing themselves and reimagining themselves as people with agency. Absolutely vital for them. And then I think the other thing, which we haven't talked about yet, is that teachers have to be really realistic about the world, but they have to be hopeful. And they have to inspire kids when we go back that the world, I personally don't want it to go back to what it was, because I don't think it was that great. But I want them to think that the world will be better than it is now, and they have to hold on to that. And the way in which they hold on to that is the kind of teaching and the kind of curriculum that we do with them. So that if we do things, so Teaspoon of Light's a beautiful piece of work. I think it's so simple. They help a little girl in the story to get her dreams back. Well, that kids get the chance to do that is really important for them, because they see that they've got something to offer. Carol's written a lot and thought a lot about the volunteer army and the importance of that for older kids in Christchurch after the earthquake. And I see that they're doing that work in Christchurch now. They're back working with older people. And it's that sense that we all need. even little ones need it too. Children need it too. They need to have a sense that they're not just the person being helped. There are 80-year-olds going out and helping old people. Doing all that. We all need to feel that we've got something to offer. And that's what you need to give your kids to do in your curriculum work. Give them something where they're helping somebody inside a story, inside something that works. So Teaspoon of Light is up. You can see the little ones doing it in Christchurch after the earthquake. It will be part of the resource that we're releasing towards the end of this week.
Thanks, Peter.
So, go ahead, Leanne.
Just quickly, I've heard about the anxious and the anxiety. I just wanted to share with everybody what I've started to do. Already in my Zoom classroom, I meet with them once a day. I've already started to have those conversations about how they're feeling, and being able to say to them that I am here and I'm still here and I'm still me, and I will be there. And I will be there for them. And we're doing virtual hugs because I'm a very huggy person, if you know me. And so for my kids, it's like virtual hugs, everyone, because I'm missing that. But I will be there and I can be your rock. And that's something that I've already started in my Zoom meetings with my kids already, to try and ease some of that anxiety that they might be having about what next. So thank you, Carol.
Can I just jump in there?
Yep.
I am on. I'm just, yeah. I hadn't muted myself. We've developed a resource for teachers, which I think could be done both online and at home, and it's using Aroha's Way, which was developed by the Like Minds, Like Mind campaign, and we've been doing that work with the John Kirwan Foundation. And it uses the story of Aroha, who really is overwhelmed by life. It's a children's picture book. It's a good one. And she discovers ways of breathing that help her. She discovers how talking to her friends help her. So again, it's around not talking directly about that, but finding ways in which you can ask children to think about Aroha and her journey, so that kids can see that that's the way through. But yeah, it's going to be hard, isn't it? Not hugging our kids, and it's a really important. Virtual hugs are really important.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more, Leanne. Aroha Way is up on the website. If teachers want to have a look at it, see how they could use it. And as I say, we'll have resources for you by the end of the week as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Carol?
I wanted to come back to one of the questions that had been sent in as well, which I think fits quite well with this, which was somebody had asked about, what do I say if I can't answer the question? And so I think now that hopefully that question isn't quite as worrying as it might have been, because you are not setting yourself up to be an expert. And part of what you do need to do is be authentic yourself. And without, going over the top and so on, you can share some of your story and your anxieties. And it's that idea that we are all in this together. And if a child asks you a question that you can't answer, well, you've dealt with that before. You've either said, does anyone else have any ideas? Or that's a really interesting question. Where might we find the answer to it? I think that the questions that you do have to be careful in the way that you answer them will be things like, will the disease go away and never come back? And one of the things that I learned from teachers and principals and talking to them, they said that the really important thing is to never make promises you can't keep. So just always keep that in the back of your mind. You can't say it will never come back. You can't say the world will go back to the way that it was. You can't say that everyone is fine and et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a little note of caution that yes, we want to be optimistic and positive and hopeful, but we can't make promises that we can't keep or we lose our credibility. But at the same time, again, it's that balancing act that, as Peter has said, about but giving those answers in a hopeful way. So how do you answer in a hopeful way? You say things like, well, we don't know that it will happen again, but wow, look at what we've learned. Our hospitals are all set up and we've been doing this contact tracing and our numbers have been going down. And so that should it happen again in the future, we've got a government that will, go straight into action and so on. So you're finding ways in which you can not make promises, but that you can provide reassurance. So you can think about that in terms of facing a question that you might not know how to deal with. And you may have, as Peter mentioned, the body bags. They may not have seen that on TV, but they will be very aware that every day, probably, if they were like me, their parents at 1 o'clock needed to know how many people had died. How many people were infected, how many people were died. We all got totally hooked into these statistics. So there may be questions about death and sickness and dying and recovery and those sorts of things. So it might just be worth your while to think about how you might answer those really difficult questions, but they do arise at other times as well. And thinking about Peter's advice, there's bound to be stories that you can use to talk about when people have faced these sorts of things. So on the website, if I'm allowed to have a little plug.
You do have your plug.
I started writing these silly little Facebook posts about a bear. You've heard about the bear now. Bear goes into lockdown for the grandchildren originally. So bear goes into lockdown, bear settles into lockdown, bear stays in lockdown. But while we were in lockdown, a relation died. And so I had Bear trying to figure out what do you do when you can't say goodbye in person and you can't send flowers and you can't hug people. And so Bear had to come up with his own solution. So already in one of the resources, they're now turned into books from Facebook posts. So they'll be up on the website that Peter is talking about, and there will be examples in there of, should those questions come up, you can always say, I wonder how Bear dealt with it. Anyway.
Awesome.
I think how Bear deals with it's really important. And again, it's that distancing thing. One of the questions which I know someone's going to ask, because I heard someone ask it somewhere last week. I can't think where. It might have been when I was walking or somewhere, and just heard someone say, what does it mean when Dad says we might lose everything? So, there's the anxiety around the illness, isn't there? But there's this huge economic uncertainty, which is just kind of like, it's going to smack over the top of everything. I mean, you think of the children who are already at the bottom, and then there's going to be over-mortgaged, over-leveraged parents who are going, holy crap, we've got, what are we going to do now? And so forth, and that just spreads right through the family. And 7-year-olds pick it up. They might, and they kind of like, what does that mean? So again, we've got some resources there around, and as teachers, it's back to that. What matters now? What matters now is answering that question, isn't it? What does it mean to lose everything? There have been people in history who have lost everything. There will be people in the world now who will lose everything. They'll lose their loved ones, they'll lose their businesses, they'll lose their homes. Not necessarily in New Zealand, but there will be people who will lose an enormous amount in this. So talking about loss and grief is the important thing about what matters. It's not about preparing them for the future, is it? It's actually about making sense of now. What does it mean to lose stuff? What did we lose? What have we lost when we've gone from the old world into this new one that we don't fully understand? They are really, really important conversations to have as adults, but they're really important for children as well. And the lucky thing is that fiction does that. Story does that for us. History does it for us. You want to talk about what it's like to lose things? But it's like, history is littered with those stories. So you can, you don't actually have to use fiction either, do you? And Carol, as a social studies teacher, would say that going back to school, you could go back through the arts, but you could also go back through social studies, because kind of understanding this through a social studies lens for children would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. One thing also I've seen here is Karen's put in a question about supporting our young English language learners with limited English. And I was sitting here thinking, would Google Translate be a good thing to be able to translate it into their language from just a discussion? Or I'm not quite sure. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not a teaching English as a second language specialist, and there will be people out there who know much more than I do, but I would think that if you take some of the ideas that we've already talked about, so picture books, you don't have to be able to read the text, because the thing about picture books is that the pictures are so rich that a child should be able to engage with stories in their own way. If we think about children pre-language, so young toddlers and so on who don't have much language, they can't read, but they can make up the most amazing stories about what they see in the pictures. So I would think that if you have books in their language, then that would be helpful. And I know that Peter has activities and things in Te Reo Māori up on the site that's going up. I certainly know there are a range of books in Pacific languages, possibly not so much in Asian languages, but is there an opportunity for parents perhaps to become engaged in doing some translation of really important stories that you might want to use? I think it's just about thinking outside the box. But I'm not sure what ideas you've got, Peter.
Well, the arts are other languages, aren't they? So the wonderful thing about music is that music is pan-language. It's pre-language, actually, in many ways. Lots of the research suggests. So using those kinds of things, using the visual arts, using dance. So one of the gorgeous resources that we've developed looks at how you express feeling through it, not just your face, but through your entire body. So we've been kind of interested in that. And it's not just second language kids who have trouble with expressing how they feel. One of the things which we've not been good at in this country, in our education system, is because, and that's because we haven't really focused on health. We've been so tied up with literacy and numeracy at the expense of everything else, that the vocabulary around feeling is very limited for children. In fact, it is for adults. You ask a man how they feel, and it's either angry. That's a bit of a gross generalization, but growing that vocabulary of feeling, so that kids have got more and more ways of describing how they feel about something, is really important. So that vocabulary work. I'm involved in another project at the moment with the Kerwin Foundation, which is a mental health resource for all primary schools. And part of what we're wanting to do right from when they're 5 is to help kids name their feelings. And it's really, really, really important. What is the word for that? What is the word for that feeling in your puku where there are butterflies that are moving around? How do you know how can you tell if someone's got that feeling? What do they look like? How do they sound? How can you pick that up? And what might you do to help them if they've got butterflies in their tummy? And again, that's really important stuff to be teaching 5-year-olds at the moment, isn't it? Looks like mum's always got butterflies in her tummy now. What should I do? How can I help? How can I help mum? Dad's always angry. Why is dad always angry? They're big, big, big questions that deserve answering. And part of the answer is to give them the vocabulary for that, the language for it. That's what we do as teachers, is we give kids, we allow them to name the world. And naming their world at the moment, a part of that is naming all the emotion that sits inside it. So lots to do when we go back. And the funny thing about that, you know, Carol and I teach at the university, and I guarantee you one thing is that when we go back, we'll go back as if nothing's happened. And we will go back and we will train our teachers as if nothing's happened either. They'll go back, and you know what? The university will tell them they need to catch up, they need to do what they've missed, and there's miles of assessment for them. But the very human thing that we're advising to you, I know that my own university won't be doing it.
I was just going to say, with you two on the case, I doubt that will happen.
Well, you know, it's part of it, isn't it? I mean, we've got all these initial teacher educate, you know, all these trainee teachers in the old language. I don't think we're allowed to call them that anymore. But, you know, all those people, and they'll go back and they'll leap into the curriculum as if COVID-19 didn't happen. Mm. It's deeply, deeply frustrating. Mm. God, I wish, you know, and it speaks volumes to the poverty of initial teacher education in this country, that teachers have to just go back to school next week with bugger all in their toolkits to help them do what they need to do. Mm. You know, I'm saying that as someone, you know, it's the largest initial teacher education provider in the country. But we just, 9 years after Christchurch, we haven't learnt the lesson. A year after the terror attack, we still haven't learnt the lesson. Who picks it up with the kids? Teachers. Yes. Mm. What support do they get? Not a lot.
Mm. Carol, anything to add?
No, I just, you know, what's that line from that police TV program, you know, sort of be careful out there. The idea is that Peter said front line, and I don't like to use battle metaphors, but yeah, you will be at the front line of whatever is happening at the moment with your online teaching, and when physically you go back to school and some of your students come back. It's going to be a long, hard journey. Pace yourself, look after yourself, care about each other, don't judge others, just do what the very best that you can do given the energy and circumstances you find yourselves in. And so on behalf of everyone in New Zealand, thank you so much for the work you do.
Yeah.
Take care.
And and just follow up, you know, back to the beginning, there are those two questions, aren't they? Do children learn what matters? So you need to work out what matters for your children and only focus on that. And if in doing that, they remember that they matter too, you'll have done everything. Mm-hmm. You don't need to do any more. Greg Johnson has a famous line in a song: first you save yourself, then you save the world. So remember that next week too. And at the moment and everything else you're doing, save yourself first, because you can't save anyone if you haven't saved yourself.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you, Carol. I really do appreciate your time. And in the background, there's been Alex, and I thank her. I forgot to mention at the very beginning to everyone that we have been recording this, and we will have access to this recording. So if you would like to forward it on to any other people that you feel might benefit from listening to our discussion today, you are more than welcome. So kia ora, everybody. Aroha to you all. Please, like everyone has said today, we have to look after ourselves first. So enjoy your gin and tonic or your vodka and orange or your wine, and don't feel bad that you're doing it. My go-to has been chocolate, just to let you know. Probably not the best thing to go to, but never mind.
Better than gin and tonic at 11 in the morning, Leanne.
Oh, no. Well, hold on, it's 5 o'clock somewhere in the world.
Must be.
Again, kia ora everybody, and thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you,
Sarah,
Leanne.
if you're on, is there anything you'd just like to say to our worksite reps?
I just posted on the side if people can just post their emails down there so we can send you a follow-up email. And also we want to run more of these sessions. So if people have ideas and want to work with us to do it, we want to support you. And lastly, a big thank you to Leanne for organising this. It was great. I had last week off, so I came back on Monday and everything was organised and sorted. So thanks heaps, Leanne, and Carol, Peter, and Alex as well. Looking forward to seeing the resources that are coming out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Take
care.
care. Stay safe.
Kia
Bye.
kaha.